thank you so much for joining us at this first meeting of the Ellicott City Project Advisory Committee. My name is Shana Hernandez. I am going to share my PowerPoint screen here. So today's meeting is meant to be largely introductory. Just wanted to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, for us, the staff, to introduce ourselves, and for everyone to get a chance to get kind of an overview of the projects that this committee is going to be covering. Just give me 1 second, I'm having some difficulties here with WebEx as usual. There we go. Okay, so this is our agenda for our meeting today. I'm hoping to keep the meeting to an hour, but if we go a little over, then that's okay. So we'll start off with staff introductions, then we'll have each of you introduce yourselves. We'll do a review of our purpose and scope, and then we'll do a quick overview of the 3 projects that this committee will be focused on. We'll have an open discussion, Q&A, talk a little committee business, and then we will adjourn. So again, my name is Shana Hernandez. I'm Senior Policy Advisor to County Executive Calvin Ball. So when each of you introduce yourselves, we have 2 little icebreaker questions that are hopefully not too corny. The first is just, what is your connection to Ellicott City? And the second is, what's one thing that has come about as a result of COVID that you wouldn't mind sticking around? So my connection to Ellicott City is that I am the county executive's point person on Ellicott City. My husband and I have enjoyed coming here over the years, and over the last 2.5 years, I have dedicated most of my waking hours to Ellicott City in one way or another. One thing from COVID that I would like to see stick around, virtual meetings. They are incredibly convenient, so I hope virtual meetings continue far into the future. I'm going to turn it over to Brian Schefter.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Schefter, new Deputy Director for Department of Planning and Zoning. My connection to Ellicott City, I would tell folks about my first visit to Ellicott City, which I was sort of duped by a friend into moving to Arbutus, thinking that I was moving to Baltimore. And the closest place to sort of go out and enjoy a drink was the Phoenix at the time. And I really enjoyed and discovered Ellicott City by virtue of the Phoenix. And one thing I'd like to stay in place would be working from home while my daughter is at daycare, so that I can actually have free reign of the house for a few hours of sanity. Thank you all.
Thanks, Brian. Zach?
Good afternoon. My name is Zach Hollenbeck. I'm an architect and project manager with the Department of Public Works, and I'm generally involved in many of our Ellicott City efforts. Really want to thank everybody for joining us and joining this group. So my connection to Ellicott City, for those of you who don't know me, I was born and raised here, and I've lived in the historic district for almost all of my life, aside from about 1.5 years where I lived in Owella Mill, right across the street from where I live now in the historic district. So I was fortunate enough to be able to find a job close to home and found a spouse who wanted to live here in Ellicott City, and I love it here, and we don't plan to go anywhere. So things that I hope stick around. I certainly echo Brian's sentiment from working from home, but I think one of the things that I've come to appreciate during these times is really getting to know the people who live in and around us without the constant travel and the shuffle and the commute. I think everyone has had a little bit more time to spend around the house and spend around their neighborhood, and I hope that post-COVID that people do that a little bit.
Thanks, Zach. And Victoria.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Olivier. I've been with the Department of Planning and Zoning for about 4 months. I moved over from the state of Maryland Planning Department. I guess my connection to Ellicott City is I used to live in New Orleans and work there as a historic preservationist post-Hurricane Katrina. And so even before I moved to the Baltimore area, I was kind of following Old Ellicott City and have really enjoyed visiting there with my daughters since we moved to Baltimore in 2019. And I think the thing I'd like to stick around is just more emphasis on outdoor activities and flexibility. Like I love outdoor dining or having music pop up in more random places. So just enjoying our community in more informal ways.
Thanks, Victoria. So now we are going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. If you could say your name, your place of employment if you want to, your general background, and then same icebreaker questions to all of you. And we are just going to go ahead and go in alphabetical order to make it easy. So Aaron Shapiro, I will start with you.
Sorry about that. I was having unmuting problems. I'm Aaron Shapiro, the Executive Director of Patapsco Heritage Greenway. My background is as an environmental historian, and I've taught preservation history, environmental history, landscape history for many years, both at Auburn University and the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I'm brand new to Ellicott City, so my connection to Ellicott City is almost none. I came here virtually came here this past fall. And I've only sort of been permanently around since about a month ago. So I look forward to building a connection to Ellicott City. And then, and secondly, I guess in terms of what I'd like to stick around, I would hope that a general respect for others that would continue to grow in public spaces, and an understanding of that we're all sort of part of a larger society, and that we need to look out for each other. I would hope that that would continue to develop over the coming year and beyond.
All right, I'm up next. Hi, I'm Allie Christ. I am the middle school learning specialist at Glenelg Country School. And so my connection to Ellicott City is I grew up in Catonsville and I lived in Oella for a long time before moving to Sylvan, Maine with my husband about 4 years ago. And I've always been sort of like a place to go out with friends and to meet people. I just love this town that we live in. And so that's my connection to Ellicott City, and my what I hope to keep around with COVID is I'm going to kind of echo what Zach said. And say that I really enjoyed getting to know my neighbors over this past year. And in all, just to be transparent, Zach Hollenbeck is my neighbor. And so it's been really nice to kind of get to know the people that live on our streets and just kind of be more active in our community.
Great. Amanda, I believe that you are on and unmuted if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, I'm Amanda Hoff. I'm the Executive Director at Visit Howard County. So my connection to Ellicott City is both personal and professional. So obviously professionally with Visit Howard County, we are responsible for marketing not just Ellicott City, but all of the county as a destination of choice for business and leisure travel. And we did just recently finish up using a grant from the State Office of Tourism Development for Ellicott City, specifically marketing of Ellicott City. So it gave us, a little above and beyond of what we would have normally been able to do. So that was an exciting project, and we learned a lot, and we're still, we have those assets that the grant helped pay for that we can still continue to use, even though, the money is, that extra money is now spent. And then personally, I grew up in Catonsville, moved to Ellicott City as a teenager, and have never left Howard County. I love it that much. Even before, when we lived in Catonsville, I wanted, my family to move to Ellicott City or Columbia, and we did. I've also been with tourism for 16 plus years, working here on Main Street in the old post office building. So I've seen a lot, experienced a lot, in that time, and, just love being here. And as far as COVID, dittoing what we heard from some others, one of the things is that is my own personal observation is how COVID has really brought the community together. So, obviously that's something, I'd like to hang on to. And just before getting on this call, the governor announced that meeting restrictions and gathering restrictions will all be lifted. Of course, we don't know what that means for Howard County yet. But with that, I was really, as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh, I hope we can keep doing virtual meetings because they do save a lot of time.
Bert, you're up. Oh, I'm sorry, Annalisa, you're up.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Just wait your turn, Bert. No. I'm Annalisa Archer. I'm a resident on Court Avenue in Ellicott City, which is my immediate connection. But my husband and my son have lived around Ellicott City for several years. We absolutely love the town, always have. It's always been a favorite destination for us. And I think part of that has to do with my background. I'm a federal executive who's held posts in a number of different agencies, including the Library of Congress and the National Archives. So I have a strong personal sense and love of history and cultural institutions like that. So there's that appeal as well. In terms of COVID and what I hope sticks around, working in DC and commuting from Ellicott City is not always fun. So I too am in the camp of hoping for virtual meetings and flexibility to continue so I can have more time after hours to walk around our beautiful town.
Now your turn, Bert.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I'm Bert Wilson. Actually, I heard two other people. I grew up in Catonsville, moved to Ellicott City when I was a teenager, graduated from Mount Hebron, and pretty much lived around Ellicott City the rest of the time. And I'm a class of 77, Hebron graduate. Anyway, we have a building on Main Street that we rehabbed in 2008 to 2010. We live on Old Columbia Pike. I have my business down here. I have a thing for just starting businesses. So we really like it around here. We like old things because the building was built in 1835 and our house was built in 1860. We just really like it around here and like to be part of the community. My background is really in power markets and natural gas markets. I had some experience in Constellation for 10 years. We started a couple companies. And right now we manage people's wholesale power, natural gas. We develop power plants, solar and modest sized natural gas plants. And as far as COVID goes, I really liked it. I didn't have to travel that much. And we had some very productive work time, of which video meetings were a big part of that. I'd like that to stick around.
Chris, you're up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Pineda. I'm the Executive Director for the Ellicott City Partnership. So my direct correlation is professionally with Ellicott City, managing the Main Street District and advocating for our businesses and our design, promotion, and economic development overall. And then for me, I think the flexibility to be able to just have flexible schedule and virtual meetings are very easy to go to. So that's what I hope that just stays with our new normal.
Thanks. David?
Hello, everyone. Good to see you. I guess I'm an outsider. I don't live in Ellicott City. I call myself a newcomer to the area. I moved to Baltimore in 1983. So I'm being a little facetious, but I do know Ellicott City from back in the day. I always have been charmed by the place. I like going there occasionally, getting a lunch or getting a drink or whatever. And so I value it. And I'm an architect and urban designer, Cho Ben Holbach, which led to Quinn Evans. So that's where I am now. And I'm working there part-time and working with Zach for Howard County on some projects, including the Kaplan's preservation project. So I would have to, that's my firm is working on it, so I'd have to recuse myself on that. And I have to admit to having been involved thinking about the buildings that were being demolished and did we really need to demolish all of those, and very happy that we're not demolishing as many now. And I'd like to see that we could make something more of an amenity of that whole valley, that stream bed, and it's a river, I admit, but making that into a kind of real amenity for the neighborhood that could be so much more powerful than it is now.
Thanks, David. So I don't believe Ezra is here, and John is going to be a little late. So Julia, you are up.
Okay. I'm Julia Sanger, and I suppose my connection to Main Street is that I've been a business owner since 2016, but I did grow up in Howard County and kind of consider this to be my true home. The thing about COVID that I would like that to go away, as much as I hate wearing masks, I have to say that I've never been accused of having a poker face. And so the beautiful thing about wearing masks is that you can no longer see certain facial expressions. And when you're somebody who deals with the public constantly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I would be okay if that aspect didn't go away anytime soon.
Here, here. I share that ailment as well. So that was a good one. Kathleen.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Flynn. Thanks, Shana, for having me. My connection to Ellicott City began when I was 16 days old and baptized in St. Paul's Church. I grew up here in Ellicott City. After college and a lot of travel, I came back. I own Simple Gifts Massage Studio, which is located at 3697 Park, right next to the courthouse. And I've been there since 2016. And one thing, I'm a fan of Zoom meetings too. I like them. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Mohan.
Hi, I'm Mojan Baga. I own a store in Main Street Orange and Rugs. And thank you for having me in this group. I look forward to seeing Ellicott City becoming a destination for social and cultural events, perhaps more plays, they used to have Shakespeare festivals, Shakespeare plays at their ruins, and perhaps more a place for people to get together as an outdoor mall, to walk around and enjoy the Patapsco State Park and be able to enjoy the beautiful architecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Brennan, Brennan and Company Architects, currently in the former church in Oella, but previously on Main Street, suffered through both floods and was displaced for a bit, but have been involved in a number of projects on Main Street for building owners. I sit on the Baltimore County Landmarks Preservation Commission, the Board of Preservation Maryland, and the Board of Preservation Howard County. So I'm happy to be here. Shaking hands, no more shaking hands.
Thank you, Rob. Roy, you're up. I think you're on mute.
How's that? Any better? Testing 1, 2, 3. Good?
Yep,
okay,
we can hear you.
All right, sorry about that. So yeah, Roy Chernikoff. I'm in Sylvan Lane. I'm also a neighbor of both Allie and of Zach. If I looked out the window, I could probably hit Allie's house with a tennis ball if I threw hard enough. And professionally speaking, I work for Nelnet Campus Commerce. I'm a business development executive working with colleges and universities throughout the Mid-Atlantic. Been in higher ed throughout my entire career. Professionally, that's on a personal note. I've been in Ellicott City since 1996, raised 3 kids here. I have been on Sylvan Lane, a half a mile from the courthouse, since 2017, and my wife and I specifically looked to find a home in the historic district after the first flood. We really wanted to be closer to the community and help with the rebuild and just be part of the community. We loved it down here. We spent a lot of time down here. Just in terms of what I love about, not love about the pandemic, but one of the things that have come about, just getting closer to the neighbors, deeper friendships with my community, and I typically travel a lot in the fall and the spring, and it's just been pretty incredible to be home and see everything bloom and see everything change seasonally. And so that's probably one of the greatest gifts that's come about from this.
Thanks, Roy. Sean, you are up.
Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me? I'm outside at my son's baseball game. Can you hear me? Okay, good. My name is Sean Glatt. I'm the Executive Director of the Howard County Historical Society. I'm also a adjunct professor of history at Howard Community College. I am a 17-year museum professional. We do have the Museum of Howard County History, which is at the top of the hill in the old Presbyterian Church, and we are currently finishing up the first Children's History Museum in Howard County that will be ready by April of next year as a part of our EC 250 celebration. My connection to Ellicott City. Well, other than working in Ellicott City, I am a Howard County guy. My family came here in 1979, so I've been here for 42 years and spent quite a bit of time growing up in Ellicott City. Now, being the director of the Historical Society, I kind of feel like all the neat little artifacts and the collection related to Ellicott City is under my purveyance. So I guess that's my connection. And what was it I want? Was something I wouldn't change about COVID? How about my savings account? Not going to the bars sure did save me quite a bit of money last year. That's great. So I'd like to keep that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara Simpson. My connection to Ellicott City is that I used to live on Main Street in my youth. Was one of the original employees of Bean Hollow, which was at the time Riverside Roastery. When I grew up a bit, we moved up on College Avenue. I am a psychologist by day, but when I'm not doing that, I am very involved with the town, and I am on the board of Historical Society, as well as am president of Preservation Howard County, and most recently in the Howard County Garden Club. What I wouldn't want to keep, I guess, is my answer from COVID, is that my husband and my two kids and myself have gotten really, really good at badminton, and we do that all the time. So I'm hoping they get scholarships to college on badminton. Thank you.
I hope that too. If I find out about any badminton scholarships, I'm sending it your way.
Thank you.
Vernon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vernon Thompson. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Howard County Economic Development Authority. I hung around in Ellicott City as a child. I grew up in Catonsville. I joined the Howard County Economic Development Authority staff in 2013. Had the interesting challenge of working the first flood in 16, and we served as the interface between property owners and shop owners and the county, state, and federal government. It was a very interesting experience, only to be eclipsed by the flood in 2018. So we got to know Ellicott City quite well. I've been through every basement, every attic, every place you can possibly hide. The place is remarkable. It's done an excellent job in coming back. Everything that you see down there now, and you kind of shake your head about, this too shall pass. There are good things ahead for Ellicott City. That's about it. Thanks.
And one thing you would keep from the pandemic?
Well, I kind of share, I think, Roy's observation. I've got an opportunity here. I've been working for my entire life, but I've had the opportunity to see the season kind of at home, which has been a significant plus. And while I've lived 3 different times in my life in Ellicott City, I currently live in northern Baltimore County for a variety of reasons. So I'm saving an enormous amount of money in gas. Getting to see the seasons change, and I do enjoy these Zoom calls, so it doesn't bother me. I could do this forever. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thanks, Vernon. Wendy.
Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Wendy Pidell. I am a Howard County firefighter paramedic for coming up on 23 years and a member of the ECP board and a longtime resident on the 8500 block of Main Street. We're very thankful to be asked to be on this committee. And the one thing I would keep from COVID, although my career will never be through a Zoom meeting, I do like how family get-togethers have become more meaningful. You see some videos or experience it yourself, and I hope that family get-togethers stay as meaningful as they are now. The end.
Thanks, Wendy. And John, so we are just going around and introducing ourselves, talking a little bit about our background, our connection to Ellicott City, and then one thing about the pandemic that you wouldn't mind if it's stuck around. I think you're muted.
What was that one thing about the pandemic? What was the last bit?
That you wouldn't mind if it stuck around, if it stayed, like one thing that's changed that you're like, oh, this isn't so terrible.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm John Shoemaker, and I've lived in our current place on Frederick Road, just right outside, just still part of the historic district. Been here for about almost 6 years, and my family owns Shoemaker Country, which will be, as of the fall, will be 20 years on Main Street now. So been around. We've seen a little bit, seen a couple of the floods and the things that have happened in town, and just glad that we're all still here and sticking it out, and hopefully we've seen the worst of it. Let's see, things about the pandemic. I do like the way that everybody's being very careful, and hopefully people will continue to maintain good, habits and stay clean and safe and healthy. The other thing that is really an odd kind of was sort of unexpected is with everybody being home and not vacationing and not going out to dinner, our business has seen quite a bit of an uptick. I think people are not spending money on things and they want their houses to be nice. And I'm sort of afraid that might change and go away after this is all over, but we'll see what happens after that.
Thanks, John. Well, I'm really excited to work with all of you. We put a lot of thought into this group, into making sure that it was a well-rounded group that represented a lot of different viewpoints in the town, and that we included, folks who've had expertise in different fields that were relevant. So I am really excited to work with all of you. And I really liked that icebreaker. I know that, the past, I was going to say year, but it's a lot more than a year now, has been really difficult and challenging and tragic. And so I'm glad that everybody was able to find a little bit of something that happened over the past 14 months that, wasn't 100% terrible. So with that, we are going to move on to the next part of our presentation. So this is just a review of the purpose and the scope of this group. So the purpose of the group is to review projects included in the scope, which is below, under the lens of each committee member's particular expertise for the purpose of ensuring that the projects are responsive to the needs of the community. Now, one thing that I would add to this purpose is we obviously couldn't have every single person who lives and works in Ellicott City on a committee. So we're really counting on you to be our ambassadors for your community. We want you to talk to your neighbors. We want you to bring their ideas and their thoughts and their feelings back to these meetings, because we want this to be an inclusive process. So I would also add that to the scope, or to the purpose. And then the scope is the 3 projects that we'll be looking at, which is the potential redevelopment of the historic courthouse, the renovation of 6 county-owned buildings on Main Street, and the expansion of Tiber Park. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Schefter, and he is going to run through an overview of the courthouse project.
Thank you, Shana. Well, since you're also familiar with the area, I'm not going to belabor all of the fine details of everything in this presentation. You all know about the courthouse. You know that there is a former detention center, the jail facility next door, an office building, and a parking lot. And together it's about 6 acres or so. The site that sits just on top of the hill. You all know that we recently completed the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan in December of 2020. This was adopted by the County Council. That plan, which included extensive input from the community and probably many of the folks on this call, included a call for mixed-use redevelopment at the site and an emphasis on pedestrian and open space connections with the Main Street area and the broader downtown. And it recommended that the uses at the courthouse properties complement and not compete with any of the existing businesses along Main Street. As many of you may be aware, we are currently in the process of a zoning map amendment. The county is seeking to change the designated zoning for the historic office area here with courthouse buildings rather, to historic commercial. So you can see here there's a little bit of a difference between the current zoning and the proposed zoning. Ultimately, the goal of the historic commercial designation is to allow for a broader mix of uses on this site that, again, would complement and not compete with similar uses that are occurring along Main Street. This slide, you can see the permitted uses. And up here in the corner, you'll see a C, that means conditional, and then an X means permitted by right. And so everything marked with an X is permitted by right to the landowner, and anything marked with a C would be conditional, meaning it would require additional approval from the county.
And this PowerPoint will be available to you. I'm having some difficulties with the bottom of the slide being cut off. So if you can't read the bottom, don't worry. I'm gonna make this available to everybody.
Thank you, Shana. So this is great. So the next slide, you'll see the difference between the historic office and the historic commercial designations. In the historic commercial, you'll see some of these larger floor plate options, like a hotel or like a store or restaurants that would be not necessarily permitted in the historic office designation. Thank you. So right now we are at the fourth stage, or we've just completed the fourth stage of these 5 stages. So there was a pre-submission community meeting held back in March. The plan was presented to the Historic Preservation Commission for advisory comment. It was then presented, it was reviewed by the Department of Planning and Zoning, and that was presented to the Planning Board on May 6th. And the evening of that hearing, the Planning Board provided a unanimous motion for support for the project, or for the map amendment rather. And so that will be finalized and it will be presented to the zoning board, where there'll be another public hearing to determine whether or not the county council sitting as the zoning board wants to endorse the change in zoning. So also happening in a parallel track is a request for information, whereby the county is seeking information from the private sector and from the community on possible reuses of the property. So this effort is occurring to sort of determine the market interest and opportunities, to inform the rezoning process, which is already sort of underway, and to explore ownership structures. In that could be the county retaining, control of the property, the county selling the property, or something in the middle where maybe it was a ground lease or some other type of arrangement. And that will also help inform the county's ultimate decision about whether the properties would be sort of a collective of one project, or if they could be handled individually in redevelopment. So we are currently at the point where responses were due April 13th. The county is assessing and reviewing the responses that have been received. And the next steps are to determine if the county wants to pursue an RFP for the sale or redevelopment of the properties. And then ultimately, if that RFP does move forward, there would be a robust sort of community-based process, and then we would be seeking, proposals from the private sector on how to redevelop that site. So you'll see here in the process, we're right in this sort of middle range, the fourth point along the arrow. So RFI was released in March. The responses were due in April. We're evaluating those RFI responses, and now we would be looking to sometime in the next month or two doing a community meeting to sort of inform everyone about where we are in that process. And ultimately, the county will make a decision about whether it wants to pursue the RFP. If the county does decide that it's going to pursue an RFP, that will occur sometime in the fall. And we would expect that by winter or early spring, we would be making a selection and determining the next steps for what happens with those properties.
And I would just add, this timeline is a little bit fluid because the rezoning is happening alongside of it. So, these dates are not definite.
Fred Net.
So before we move on to the next project, I had saved kind of a Q&A slide for the end, but if anyone has any questions about the courthouse, maybe we'll just take a pause and check in on that, or if you would rather save your questions for the end, that's fine too. So anyone have any burning questions that they absolutely need to ask right now, or questions that could wait until later?
This is Amanda. I just have a quick question about the courthouse area. So the zoning and the RFI and then eventually the RFP are kind of concurrently happening. Could the information from the RFI or the RFP impact the zoning?
In theory, they could impact the zoning, but the general assumption that we're operating under is that changing the zoning designation will ultimately encourage the broadest range of options for redevelopment on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Shana, this is Annalisa. I just have a question in terms of, given that there are already processes in place for the RFI and the RFP, where exactly do you see our group fitting into that process and giving input? So is it independent of those processes? Is there a trigger that would, involve us getting in the mix? So I'm just kind of curious, how our input plays into that.
That's a good question. So the next meeting that this group is going to have is going to focus entirely on the courthouse. And we are going to have this meeting following the public meeting, because we imagine that once we have the public meeting, that there's going to be a lot of issues that pop up during that meeting. So at that point, we're going to spend an entire probably hour-and-a-half long meeting kind of talking through the issues that come up during the public meeting, getting your feedback on what you think should be at the site, talking through the different ownership options. So that's kind of like the first engagement. We might have more than one meeting specifically on the courthouse, but before an RFP goes out, this group will be engaged at least once, maybe twice, to kind of talk through, what that RFP looks like and things like that.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, we're going to move on to the next area, but we can take more questions on the courthouse a little bit later. So I'm going to turn it over to Zach, and he is going to talk about the Main Street building renovations and also Tiber Park.
Thanks, Shana. I'm sure all of you know by now that the county has acquired 10 buildings on Lower Main Street after the 2018 flood. The county had an agreement to purchase those buildings with the various property owners, and they've since all been acquired. After we acquired them, most of you have seen us down there in the trenches, cleaning out, stabilizing, and making repairs to those. And so, you know, while we've undertaken those immediate needs to make sure that the buildings are cleaned out, structurally sound, and restore the facades of the buildings that will be retained, we're undertaking this analysis here, you know, through input from this group to figure out what our best use for these 6 remaining buildings that will be modified but still remain in place at the conclusion of these flood mitigation projects is. So there's 6 buildings that I mentioned before that we're retaining, but we have to modify in some way. Most of these buildings, some of you are intimately familiar with. All of them, aside from the T on the Tiber building at 8081, span the stream channel beyond. And so we'll be removing the section of the building or part of the section over the stream channel to remove that constriction over the conveyance network and allow additional capacity in the stream channel beyond. These buildings are very unique. There's no two the same. You know, we go all the way from a cut granite circa 1840s building on the left side of the screen through a terracotta building, a contemporary steel and plank building, a wood framed building, and a brick contemporary for its time in the 1920s white span steel structure. So these buildings will all have spaces that are modest in size, but are certainly harmonious with the other array of spaces present within the historic district. And so we'll be analyzing and looking at how we reuse them. And so as we look to how we reuse these buildings, what uses in the near term and long term might be best there, we'll be doing so under the policies that were outlined in the Ellicott City Master Plan, which Brian and Shana referenced earlier, was adopted in the spring unanimously by the County Council. And so specifically regarding these buildings, at policy 8.5 established in the master plan about how we will use those buildings and incorporate things like high ground access, interpretation of parts of the building that were removed. And so a little bit of that here on the bottom left picture is the current condition of the rear part of Kaplan's. And so we ended up having to remove the rear section of Kaplan's when the county purchased it because it was in danger of collapse. But we were able to maintain the rear far wall, the exposed steel structure, and building on that policy 8.5 with interpretation. And we'll also be looking at specifically policies 1.5 with public realm design and user comfort, as well as policy 4.3 with creative spaces initiative. You know, how do we look at uses that complement you know, what's going on in the historic district. And so our timeline for these, we have a number of parallel efforts like the courthouse has. So we have an effort to remove the portions of the building over the stream channel, which is in design, and the construction of that is funded, and we'll be progressing that once we get through the federal Section 106 process. We have an effort that Dave Ben mentioned earlier, that his firm Quinn Evans Architects has been engaged with us on redesigning a new facade for Kaplan's that both replicates the historic facade, but also that is constructed in a resilient way. And then so the efforts that we'll be looking on here, we recently engaged an architectural firm to assist us with a code and use study. And we see this group helping to build on those efforts to hopefully collectively arrive at a concept for reuse of those 6 buildings that allows us to move forward with a final design and reuse of those buildings.
And just one thing I wanted to add here, and Zach can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the funding for the renovation of these buildings is actually included in the current budget that the council is debating. So we should know fairly soon if that funding is going to be available in fiscal 22, which starts in July. So any questions about the buildings before we move on? Okay, Zach?
Great. So, looking back at the 10 buildings that we have, unfortunately, 4 of the buildings have to be removed in order to construct one of the components of the EC Safe and Sound Flood Mitigation Plan, known as the Maryland Avenue Culvert. And so in order to construct the Maryland Avenue Culvert, like I mentioned, we have to unfortunately remove 4 buildings. However, that gives us an opportunity to consider, what do we do with that space? And how do we develop that space into an expanded Tiber Park? These illustrative drawings here were included in the Watershed Master Plan. And so as we look to what this space will become and how we will improve this space, we look again to the Watershed Master Plan, specifically Policy 8.3, which is associated with Tiber Park. And we need to consider that and look at that along with Policy 8.4, the B&O Plaza, which the master plan defined as the area in front of the B&O Museum, and how these spaces can, as they're neighboring each other, how they can work together collectively, what opportunities they might have. So we'll be looking at that. The diagram on the sheet here is an image that we included with our application to remove those 4 buildings and construct the Maryland Avenue Culvert to the county's Historic Preservation Commission. So it represents an illustrative view of what we view could be an interim design for this space, but we'll be specifically looking at how we develop the final design requirements and the final design approach for this space. And so timeline-wise, the effort to construct the Maryland Avenue Culvert project and the stream channel is progressing through its final design, and we anticipate that will start as soon as we can upon completion of the federal Section 106 process, which is ongoing, which I mentioned earlier, and other regulatory approvals. That allows us, that project itself is going to take a little while, so that allows us enough time to develop a good program, a good concept for this space, advance through final design, and commence construction once we have that culvert installed, and gives us a good opportunity to provide a final solution to this space.
Okay, questions about any of the 3 projects? Don't be shy.
Do we have any sense of timing of all of this? I mean, I realize that, a lot of these projects are dependent on other things happening, and some of those things are out of our control and all of that, but it feels like already we're talking about things that, we're talking about RFPs that aren't even until 2022, and I understand that the Section 106 process is a lengthy process and all of that, but just, I mean, do we have a goal, I suppose, of when we'd like to see some of these things accomplished?
If you would ask Calvin Ball, he would tell you the goal was yesterday. So to clarify the RFP, we're shooting for this year for the RFP, not 2022. The rezoning may get pushed into 2022 just because we have no control over when the zoning board schedules their meetings. So the zoning might push, but we are hoping to do the RFP this year. In terms of the Section 106 process, it has taken a lot longer than we had hoped, than we had originally believed it would take. We are cautiously optimistic. I'm always nervous to put out timelines when it comes to the Section 106, because talk about having no control. We think the fall that we will be complete with the Section 106. So the other thing that we need in order to start the building removal is we need approval from CSX. When we went through the HPC process for the building removal, they did eventually approve the building removal, but they made it contingent upon us receiving our approval from the federal Section 106 process and from CSX. So we have been talking to CSX. We are in the process with CSX. We're hopeful that we'll be able to wrap up the CSX process around the same time as the federal 106 and get started with the buildings this fall. So our current timeline is this fall to start with the building removal.
So even though, and I understand why CSX is involved, but CSX is involved because we're talking about digging under the tracks for the culvert, but what exactly does CSX have to do with the actual removal of the buildings? Or is that, it doesn't really matter at this point because that's what HPC has said?
Also, no, it's a good question. So HPC's reasoning is that if we don't get approval from CSX, we can't build the culvert. And if we can't build the culvert, then we shouldn't take down the buildings.
Why take the buildings down?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I get it. So we understand that. Like I said, we have been working with CSX. We're in their process. So far, they have not indicated any reason why they would not approve us building the culvert. So we feel good about that. We do not need CSX approval to do the 6 building partial removal.
Okay.
So that we do have to go through HPC for that. So as of right now, we don't need CSX approval, but who knows? But the 6 buildings are completely separate from the Maryland Avenue culvert. The 6 buildings, we're removing the backs because it's a constriction over the stream channel. So, you know, the Section 106, I'm sorry, the HPC may put forth additional conditions on us. We don't know yet because we haven't gone to the HPC for that partial removal yet.
Okay, so we're talking about 2 sort of separate things here.
Yes.
The HPC process that we just went through for 4 months or whatever it was.
Yes.
That was for that was specifically for the removal of the 4 buildings. They came back and said, fine, you can take them down as long as we have 106 approval and we have CSX approval.
Correct.
Now, on top of that, or in addition to that, we have to go to HPC for the removal of the rear. You know, whatever we're removing off the buildings, the remaining 6 buildings.
Correct.
We have to go through that process again.
Correct, but we are I was going to say optimistic. I don't know if optimistic's the right word. We hope that that process will not be as lengthy because these are the 6 buildings that we're saving. So these buildings were slated for full removal, and now we're saving them, and we're just taking off the parts that, you know, that are constricting the stream. So we're hopeful that the process for HPC won't be as lengthy as it was for the 4 building full removal. And I understand why it was so lengthy. That was a big decision for them. It's, you know, a big decision for the town, but I think that, you know, these 6 buildings, I think it's a little different, and so I'm hopeful that the process won't be quite as long.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily criticizing the process. It's more just you know, everything, as with most things like this, everything is taking monumentally longer than what anybody anticipates it's going to.
Yes.
So, you know, when we start talking about, you know, what the purpose of this committee is and what we're going to be reviewing, it turns into, okay, you know, are we talking about something that's 4 years down the road, or are we talking about something that's 18 months down the road?
No, these projects are imminent. Of the 3, the one that's the farthest away is the redesign of Tiber Park. But, you know, like I said earlier, the funding for the renovation of the 6 buildings was proposed in the county executive's budget. So as long as the council approves it, we'll have funding for renovation available in July. And then, you know, we really just need HPC approval. So, and the courthouse is, you know, like I said, we're moving on that this summer. So the only project that's a little further out in the distance is the redesign of Tiber Park because the construction of that won't happen until the Maryland Avenue culvert is complete. But the other 2 projects are happening, we hope, pretty quickly.
Okay, fair enough.
So this is Rob Brennan. I'd like to speak to the eternal struggle between highest and best use and qualitative design, and how will that be monitored or ensured?
I think it's thanks, Rob. It's certainly certainly an interesting struggle, and I think looking at the buildings along Lower Main Street. So the county has, through the master plan process and upon acquisition, we have stated all along that those buildings, these 6 buildings, will remain in the county domain, county ownership until completion of all of the flood mitigation projects. And so when we look at the county retaining ownership of the buildings, we want to try to figure out how do we use them in a complementary manner while allowing perhaps their highest and best use to be determined at a later date once the flood mitigation projects are complete. So I think it's a good challenge. I'm sure as an architect, we approach it as there's no challenge we can't solve. I think of it as, how do we incorporate sound design decisions that allow those spaces to have multiple uses, and perhaps we may have a program that we think now is a good use of these county assets, and then we might at a later date have another use.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about the buildings is we want to use them to draw people back down to the bottom of the street. So, like Zach said, what they end up being in the short term may not be what they are in the long term, but decisions need to be made in the design that can be flexible for both short term and long term use.
I got a question, Shana.
Yeah.
And it probably goes to Zach, but what's the end plan for these buildings? I mean, that was a good question about the architectural, like the highest and best use. Is the county, is the plan to kind of renovate these things in a way to complement what's on Lower Main Street, which would be nice since I'm kind of sitting right down on Lower Main Street right now, and then return them to private sector in some way, and then let the private sector people figure out exactly what to do with those buildings. But in so doing, you've got to design it in such a way that suggests a use. And I'm not an architect either. So, that's part of that's the first part of my question. The second part is, having renovated a building on Main Street, which was quite a challenge, why, I'm curious, this is a curiosity question. If you're just taking the backs off a building, does that require HPC to comment on it?
It does.
I'm just curious because we had an issue like that and it didn't seem to require much comment.
I think a project of this, and Zach can talk more specifically about why we have to go to HPC, but a project of this magnitude, an external alteration of this magnitude, I believe would have to go to HPC. The first part of your question, Bert, we haven't decided exactly what will happen once the flood mitigation is in place. I don't think that the county wants to be a long-term landlord of 6 buildings on Main Street. The purpose of keeping the buildings in the public domain until the flood mitigation is complete is that we want to have control over the occupancy. So we want to be able to, if we feel that there is a threat for whatever reason, we want to be able to say these buildings are closed, and make sure that we're ensuring the safety of all of the occupants. So it is going to be a little tricky trying to figure out how in the short term we renovate the buildings and have a use for them that is beneficial to Main Street while still thinking about what they might want to be, down the road. A couple of things that I can tell you that have come up several times are public restrooms at the bottom of the street. That's an idea that has been very much discussed and asked for. And the other thing that we know that we are very interested in is egress off of the back of the buildings, because there is land on the other side that you can easily, well, not easily, but land on the other side that you can connect to. And so again, just in the spirit of safety, we would be interested in creating some sort of egress off of the back of the buildings.
Okay.
I think one other note too is, there could be some combination of, at the end of the flood mitigation projects where there might be one or more buildings that it becomes determined might be in the county's best interest to retain. And as Shana noted, that might be a building that is, including other public amenities that were outlined in the master plan, like Shana mentioned, with restrooms or other.
Right. So no decisions have been made. But what we do know is that we want to get these buildings fixed up. We want to find a use for them that's going to benefit the street, that's going to draw people to the bottom of the street. And that's something that we really hope that you all can help us with.
Right, and that is sort of going to the prior question about highest and best use. So you're not necessarily trying to design them for the highest and best use. You're trying to design them for the best complementary use, at least in your view, since you own it, county owns it, which I think is great. I think that's fantastic. And then let the private, somewhere down the road, let the private sector take over once you set the path for them. Okay, all right. It seems to make sense to me.
Other
This is
questions?
David, I have a question too about the process. Would it be possible for this group to do a kind of tour and kind of walk the different buildings, especially inside the courthouse building or maybe the boundaries, so that we're all sort of coming from it from the same, at least a walkthrough that we're coming from the same point of view. For example, Tiber Park, I've seen the bottom talked about a lot, but I don't know how far it extends up. And so there's a bunch of questions that might be nice if we could. I know everyone was talking about how much they love Zoom, but it would be nice to perhaps do a real meeting and walk, so we're all a little bit more on the same kind of baseline.
I think that's a great idea, David. I think for the courthouse, I can say that is probably not going to be a problem. I cannot commit to bringing everyone inside the buildings without checking with our attorneys. I think they would not be happy with me if I did that. So I would need to check in terms of liability issues. I mean, these buildings don't have power. They don't have, I would just need to make sure that from a liability standpoint that our risk management folks would be okay with us bringing people inside the buildings. But I think we can definitely walk the courthouse site. We can definitely walk Tiber Park. We can definitely walk the outside of the buildings and talk about them. I'm just not sure if I can bring folks inside of the buildings.
Yeah, I just think we should do this as part of our kind of kickoff of the process a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea.
Shane, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And I don't know if I haven't seen where this has been addressed anywhere. What about the auxiliary buildings up around the courthouse, like where the fingerprints, the sheriffs, like, are they also moving? What's going on with those other buildings? Just curious.
I'm going to pitch that to Brian because I'm not 100% sure. I know that everybody inside the courthouse is moving, but I don't know what's happening with all of the other auxiliary buildings.
Okay, just curious.
Truthfully, I don't know either. Maybe
Brian,
Zach knows.
Yeah, so Sean, all of the county personnel that are associated there, be it county or sheriff or circuit court personnel, are relocating. So there won't be any county personnel located.
Okay.
So, while our petition to change the zoning through the map amendment process only includes the county-owned parcels, as the county can only petition to change its own property.
So who owns those? The county does not own those other auxiliary buildings. Is that correct?
No, I think actually, I think Kathleen, who is on, is perhaps a tenant or maybe an
Correct.
owner.
Yeah. It's one landlord that owns the fingerprint building, my building, the building next to us. And we don't have any plans that I know of to leave.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
Mojan also owns one of the buildings next door to Kathleen's building, perhaps.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
More questions?
Hi, it's Tara. When you're talking about the courthouse, does that also include the jail? Just because I think that's a building that is obviously very significant, but I'm just not hearing if that's possible to be going into, or
Yeah. So
do you put those together, Shana? Okay.
Yeah. When we say courthouse, we mean the 4 associated properties. So the courthouse, the office building, the parking lot, and the jail. And we haven't made a decision about, are all 4 of these properties going up for redevelopment? Are we keeping any of them? You know, those decisions have not been made yet, but the rezoning does seek to rezone those 4 properties. So we should probably get better at saying courthouse complex. And when we say courthouse complex, we mean those 4 properties.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure.
Shayna, I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
The first is, will it be possible for our group to get information on what may be planned or contemplated for other projects that are in close proximity to the ones that we're considering? For example, what's going on with Mount Ida, what's going on with the paper mill down at the bottom of Main Street as you go into Oella, just to kind of get a sense, to the extent that it's publicly available and there's information that can be shared. I feel like that might be helpful as we consider different options for the properties that we're looking at.
So Mount Ida is owned by a private property owner. So it is at the discretion of that property owner if she wants to share what her plans are. There's actually a public meeting happening about the mill next Wednesday. I can try and find like the exact information about that. That's a little easier to share because we have been talking to Baltimore County about it. They, you know, even though it's in Baltimore County, they understand that it's going to impact Ellicott City, and so they have been keeping in communication with us about that. So I think that we can share as much information as is publicly available on both of those projects, and it may be a little harder with Mount Ida, like I said, because that's a private property owner.
Sure. Yeah, totally understand that. I think the mill would be just kind of interesting context for us to have. And then my second and last question is, in terms of expectations and for us, in terms of gathering input from our respective communities, any do's or don'ts as far as that goes in terms of how we might couch that solicitation to folks? I just want to make sure that if, you know, that there's any words of advice there, that we hear them from you and we kind of stay within the lines of what you all might be expecting.
That's a good question. I'm going to answer, and then I am going to have Zach correct me. I don't think that there are necessarily do's or don'ts, right? I mean, we want to hear from the community. We want to hear from people who are in favor of the rezoning, people who are not in favor of the rezoning. We want to hear all the different opinions, all of the different ideas. You know, I think that this community is incredibly creative and innovative, and so if there are ideas out there that we haven't thought of, we want to know what they are. You know, we're not on a rigid path where, you know, we're only going to go one way and that's it. Like, we want to know what people want to see in their community. So I can't really think of any do's or don'ts. I mean, don't tell people that whatever they want is definitely going to happen. Maybe that's the biggest don't. Other than that, I mean, you know, I'm just really interested in hearing what people have to say. And so Zach, come and clean up the comment, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, you know, this group is great because it includes so many residents here, as well as some industry professionals. You know, we want to hear whatever it is that our neighbors want to tell us to inform these projects. And I think there's no such thing as a bad idea. You know, we're open to everything.
Yeah,
you know,
I would just don't tell them that if they're like, I want to see a water slide from the courthouse. Don't be like, yes, we're going to do that, you know, because we don't know. So
Sure.
I would say just don't commit to anything.
That was my top idea. Darn.
Yeah, either water slide or bouncy house, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly none of us can you know, absolutely say with certainty that anything we do will move forward, because the funding for all of these efforts must be appropriated by the council, and you know, they're independent of all of us. So that's another thing to consider as we.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when it comes to the buildings, you know, the county executive proposes funding, the council approves funding. So a lot of this is also contingent upon the availability of funding, assuming that, you know, this year it's assuming that the council passes the funding that was included.
And just real quick to touch on your prior question, I mean, Any info on our projects that we can share that will help guide these decisions, that's what we're here for. And I think Shayna does an excellent job at maintaining the EC Safe and Sound website with project information as well.
And the Facebook page.
And the Facebook page, yep.
Thanks, that's all I had.
Other questions?
It's Tara again. I was just wondering, will this committee have access to the RFI responses?
So we are going to discuss generally what we heard from the RFI in the public meeting. So we probably will not like hand out the RFI responses, but we'll talk about them in the terms that that we can talk about them in. And you know, we will always strive to provide as much information as we can without crossing any procurement lines. Any other questions? No?
I have one more question. I'm sorry. I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of
I'll
course.
stop asking questions.
No, that's
so
okay.
Who is the chair of this committee?
So we don't have a chair. It's a staff-led committee. So myself and Brian and Zach and Victoria are kind of just, you know, we're staffing. Don't necessarily have a chair. Happy to take ideas from anybody if there's things that you'd like to hear about. It's just kind of the way that we decided to structure it. So yeah, I mean, if there are specific items that you would like to see us cover, we would like to hear from all of you about what those items are. And, you know, if we get a little further down the road and we feel like maybe we do need a chair and that's something that people are really wanting, then I think that we can explore that. Any other questions?
I have a question. What would cause it to be difficult to release the RFI to the committee?
So Brian, are you able to talk a little bit about, I mean, like I said, we're going to talk generally about what we heard. I'm just not sure that we're going to say, you know, like XYZ development company said XYZ. Brian, are you able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there are some general concerns about disclosing the particulars of a particular you know, developers' ideas about the site just from a competition standpoint and you know, proprietary reasons that, you know, we don't want to discourage future companies from sharing their ideas with us through RFI. But I think there's also, you know, as Shane has mentioned, there we can talk in broader terms about, you know, what we heard and what the possibilities are to just get your feedback on that. Ultimately, what the RFIs tell us are just part of the sample of the information that we're trying to take in and sort of process to make that determination about how we would move forward if we're going to move forward with an RFP. And that's just one piece of it.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, I think we're going to move toward adjournment. A couple of things as we're kind of closing out. How does everyone feel about a 5 o'clock meeting time? Is this like good or bad? It's one thumbs up. Can I get like a thumbs up or thumbs down on a 5 p.m. meeting time? Okay, I'm seeing one thumbs down, mostly thumbs up. Okay. So the next meeting is going to be scheduled, like I said, after we have our public meeting. I'll send out a doodle poll. We're not on a set schedule because the timing of the meetings is really dependent upon what's happening in the process. But, you know, we will have a public meeting on the courthouse, which I would encourage everyone to attend. And then, you know, and I'll send out a doodle poll for the next meeting. I would anticipate our next meeting being probably in about 6 weeks. That's probably about the right time frame, assuming that we can get the community meeting in before that. I just lost my train of thought because people walked outside of out of my window, and that's my train of thought disappears. So, sorry, was somebody saying something?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest that, for those of you who aren't familiar, that you glance through the master plan if you haven't done that in a while, or maybe you aren't familiar with it at all, because many of those policies that we talked about, basically the bulk of the effort of this group will be guided through the policies that were in that plan and adopted by the council.
Yeah, I would agree. The master plan is quite long, but if you read through the parts that are specific to the courthouse or to placemaking, or to Main Street, if you just kind of generally read through some of the concepts, I think that that'll help as we're going through our work. I really liked the idea, I think it was David's idea who left, about actually seeing the sites. So that's something that I'll work on, and that might be something we can do even before we have our next meeting, depending on everyone's availability. So I'll be working on that. And other than that, I think we're all set. Brian or Victoria or Zach, did you have anything? Oh, Roy, did you have a question?
Just a quick question, Shannon. Will you be making the recording available to us, or for anybody that's not able to make the meetings?
Yes, the recordings and the agenda and the minutes will be available on the EC Safe and Sound website under the tab Developing an Inclusive Process. You'll see a little section just for this group. And that's where we'll put the recording and all of the information. The PowerPoint we'll put up there. So everything will be available on that website. And I'll also send the PowerPoint out to you later this week.
Great.
Yes, Vernon. I think you're muted.
Said I'm saying goodbye.
Oh, okay. Okay. Brian or Zach or Victoria, did you have anything else to add?
Nope. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate the time.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It was great seeing you all, and I will see you again very soon.